Grayscale is massively dumping once again. And it does seem like this time around, it's because of Genesis. Genesis needs to sell 1.3 billion. We thought they were selling last week. That's not the case. They started selling this week. So they sold 500 million on Thursday, 500 million on Friday. And unfortunately, the other ETFs could not compensate and could not eat it all up. But again, I've been saying this. You need an entity that's selling $500 million worth of Bitcoin per day just to move the needle a little bit for Bitcoin. What happens when the minus 500 stops? We saw briefly when Grayscale selling went below 100 million. That's when Bitcoin started exploding. And then every single day, right before market open, it does seem like Bitcoin wants to explode. And then Grayscale selling kind of dampens the mood. But there's only so much they need to sell. And these guys are still accumulating hundreds of millions of Bitcoin per day. And I'm talking about all these other ETFs. But you know what? They're not the only ones that are salivating. You got Hong Kong that has 22 applicants for crypto exchanges. We talked about this in 2023. Hong Kong did not open. Yes, it's legal to trade crypto, but they don't have any exchanges yet. So that is about to happen. When you have 22, maybe not all 22, but when you have crypto exchanges open up in Hong Kong, that's going to cause a bigger frenzy in terms of Bitcoin and crypto buying. And let's not forget, Hong Kong also has a lot of spot ETF applicants too. That's all coming. I totally forgot about this as an amplifier for this year, as a catalyst to drive things even higher. Okay, don't ignore this. Asia has a huge population with a ton of money that will all be flowing in. So that's also coming. Bitwise, who also has Bitcoin ETF and doing quite well, well, their CIO went on air today and said a bigger wave is about to come in the next month. So if you think it's a big wave now, wait until the halving event and afterwards, because the waves will be much bigger. Much, much bigger. Let's listen to this real quick. This is actually pretty good. Just a few minutes of this.
Bitcoin this morning trading just at about 63,000 almost, $62,808. Has now jumped 50% since the start of the year and is nearing its all-time high, with much of that action driven by heavy interest in new spot Bitcoin ETFs. Our next guest helps run one of them. I want to bring in Bitwise Chief Investment Officer Matt Hogan. Good morning to you. When you look at what's been driving this price action on Bitcoin, Matt, how much of this is retail investors investing directly in Bitcoin? How much of it is the ETF? How much of it is institutions in the ETF?
Absolutely. It's a great question. We're seeing enormous demand for the Bitwise Bitcoin ETF and across all of these ETFs. And the answer is it's all of those categories. You're seeing retail investors come into these ETFs. You're seeing hedge funds, you're seeing RIAs or independent financial advisors. I think there's an even bigger wave coming in a few months as we start to see the major wirehouses turn on. But this has been Bitcoin's IPO moment. It's in a new era of price discovery, and I think prices could go substantially higher from here.
Let's talk about where they could go in just a minute, but I just want to go back to this idea of who you think is buying these ETFs, meaning how much of this is retail versus institutions?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when these ETFs first launch, they're not turned on at the major wirehouses, at the major institutions. So the initial demand out of the gate for any ETF, including these, is primarily retail and independent financial advisors and hedge funds. So I think that's the primary driver. That's what we're seeing. Right. But I'll tell you, after this meeting, I'm getting on a plane to go talk to one of the largest institutional consultants in the US about this ETF. So we're going to see that next wave of institutional capital.
You did mention hedge funds, which I will put in sort of an institutional.
I'll just end it there. But you heard it from the man. If you thought there was a lot of buying now, wait until the next wave comes. Okay? I guess there's very many different layers of institutional companies, right? I guess there's many different layers. So man, it's going to get so crazy, so exciting, so FOMO-ish in the next few months. It's been exciting, but it's going to get even better. And according to this, if we're going to go back on track, we should hit like $900,000 by the end of 2025. And I know what you're thinking. $900,000. Is that even reasonable? Is that even possible? Or is that a silly dream at this point? Well, let me show you something. Oops. Where's that chart I want to show? This chart right here. So, I mean, this is basically just marking out, right? The marking out the top and projecting where we should be. If you look at 2021, again, had we not had macro conditions like in the US, we had Fed rate hikes. Had we not had that, Bitcoin would have hit that trend line. And that trend line is right around $100,000. So if we pretend like, yeah, we hit $100,000 and we hit $20,000 in 2017, right? Then the next trajectory for the end of 2025 is around there, around 900,000. It's not quite there yet, but it shows more like, you know, $700,000, $800,000, right? But you know what? This cycle may be unlike any other cycle before. Maybe we don't just hit a peak and just start coming down. With the big boys that continue to buy ETFs and hold ETFs, who's to say that we have to end our cycle in 2025? Maybe we just keep on going. Maybe this cycle becomes a super cycle and we just slowly trend upwards forever. We have no more 70, 80% dips for Bitcoin. This may be the last cycle that anyone could accumulate cheap Bitcoin. And if that's the case, if we're heading in that same trajectory, well, you could see that, yeah, 900,000 is not too far off. According to this, it will happen in 2025. Maybe not the very, you know, maybe not right away, but maybe we will hit it in 2025. I guess we'll just have to see. We'll have to see. We'll have to see what Bitcoin ends up by the end of this year, and then we'll see where it ends up mid next year, and then we'll see where it ends up by the end of 2025. If we somehow hit 900,000 by 2025, you guys all need to give me like $1 million super chats. I'm just kidding. But you know what? It's in the charts.